starting off right. So the Gemara that we've been learning is all about the davening, the morning prayer, the afternoon prayer, the night prayer. And one of the questions that the commentaries ask is, why are we starting off with the morning prayer when with Kriyas Shema, we started off the first Mishnah, we started off with the night Shema. And here, how does our Mishnah start? Our Mishnah starts with the morning prayer. And so the commentaries discuss this. Why does it switch? In fact, the first page of the Gemara talked about why the Mishnah started with the night, and it mentioned a few reasons. And it mentioned about the fact that it says b'shach b'cha uvekumecha. It mentions that Shema is when you lie down and when you rise. What does that sound like? First comes the night Shema, and then comes the morning Shema. So that was one reason why Shema was the night first. We spoke about the laws of the night Shema first. And then we spoke about the laws of the morning Shema. And there's a verse for it. B'shach b'cha uvekumecha. We say it in the Shema, that when you lie down, when you get up. Now, that would explain why Shema, we start with the night. And with regard to Shemona Esrei, there's no verse. So we could theoretically start by day. However, there is another explanation in the Gemara on the first page. And that explanation said, goes by just like the Jewish day, it always starts at night. The day begins, Vayihi Erev, Vayihi Boker, Yom Echad. The night is first, and then comes the day. So according to that, it would seem that we should say the Shemona Esrei laws from the night and then the morning. So that's a question that the commentaries ask. Anyone have any thoughts on that? Ezra. You're muted.
Yeah. So the Shema you have to say twice because of the way the pasuk comes along. But the reason why it's not done at why the Shemona Esrei is not done at night or isn't it wasn't discussed first at night is because perhaps at that time when we were talking about doing things, whether it's a reshut or it's a chovah, shachrit, if you make any kind of connection with the korban tamid that occurred, then you normally would have that in the morning and in the afternoon, but there's nothing in the evening. So
that's correct. That's great. Very good, Ezra. Ezra came up with one of the commentaries mentioned, and that is that we will be finding out on the next page that the prayers are established in commemoration of the sacrifices. And if they're in commemoration of the sacrifices were not really brought at night. They're really brought, the first one is in the day. You first bring the morning one, and then you bring the second sheep is brought Bein Harabayim in the afternoon. And the leftover fats were then burned on the altar at night. So really, if you look at the laws of sacrifices, the morning sacrifice is really what comes first. Then comes the afternoon sacrifice, and then comes whatever fats and limbs are left over that need to be burned. Then they're thrown on the altar and they're burned during the night. So it really does begin with the morning. So if prayer is in place of sacrifices begin with the morning sacrifice. Now, the other option the Gemara mentions is that prayer is in place of that who instituted the prayers? The patriarchs. So which patriarch established the morning prayer? Which one established the afternoon prayer? So Abraham did the morning, Yitzchak did the afternoon, Yaakov did the night. So which one was established first? Shachris. So that's the reason why our Mishnah talks about the morning prayer first, even though the Mishnah in the beginning talks about Kriyat Shema of the night first. Because when it comes to Kriyat Shema, there was reason for Kriyat Shema to be mentioned, the laws of Kriyat Shema at night first. And regarding the prayers,
Rabbi,
let me just mute everyone 1 second.
please.
Regarding the prayers, there's reason to talk about the morning prayer first and give priority to that. Yes, Susan.
The sacrifice is only at night or in the morning?
So the way it worked with the sacrifices, there were numerous sacrifices. The main daily sacrifice there were two of them. It was the morning one and the afternoon one. But even though they were sacrificed in the morning and the afternoon, they're called the Karban Tamid. It's called the regular daily sacrifice.
Okay.
Even though they were done in the morning and the afternoon, but whatever was left over from them was burned on the altar that night.
Okay.
And so the main time of those sacrifices started in the day, and then the second one was the afternoon, and then afterwards it was like whatever was left over.
I see.
So it begins in the day. The morning one would be the first.
Rabbi,
Yes.
the Akedah, where Abraham Avinu, he attempts to sacrifice Yitzchak. Is that what time of the day did that take place? Was that supposed to be in the morning? Because if Shachrit is the sacrifice of Abraham Avinu, I would think that it might have taken place in the morning. Abraham Avinu's going to sacrifice Yitzchak.
That's an interesting thought. Let me just mute everyone because the background noise is like a whistle. That's a very interesting thought, an interesting question. It does say, "Bayim hashlishi vayisa Avram aseinav." On the third day, it says Avram lifted his eyes. Vayaras hamakom meirachok. He saw the place from afar. Vayomer al narav shulchan payim achamar. Right, vani vanar nelcha koven hashachava. He told the others to wait there, and I will come back. And vani vanar nelcha koy, and I and the lad Yitzchak will go. Neshtachava neshuv alechem. Then we will come back. So it does seem like maybe he started in the morning by Yom HaShlishi, by Yisa Avram Asenu. It seems it was, the third day, maybe the morning. But I don't know. I'd have to look up in the Midrashim if they talk about that exactly when it was. But it's not, I don't know if it's 100% connected. This was like an extra sacrifice. This was not one of this is not necessarily the verse that the Gemara uses, Bereshis Yud Tes. Bereshis Yud Tes is definitely not the Akedah. Bereshis Yud Tes, V'yashkim Avraham ba'bayker al ha'makom asher amad sham. That is, I'm trying to think where that verse is, but I don't. Do I have it? Okay, let's take a look where that verse is. In other words, the source of Abraham establishing the prayer is, I believe, later on. Let's take a look. Chapter 19. It's about Sodom and the Lot's daughters. So it's not, connected to the Akedah. So yeah, so it's not really. I guess it's not such a important factor to discuss the Akedah, just because he established the regularly morning prayer, and Yitzchak established the afternoon prayer. It doesn't necessarily mean that the Akedah sacrifice was connected to the prayer they established. You get what I'm saying? In other words, you're mixing in this Kedah, which not necessarily is it connected, but it's an interesting thought. It would be interesting to see. Maybe the Midrashim talk about when he actually brought it and if it's connected. So a little homework for you, Moshe. Do you have the Medrash says? Maybe you'll look it up in the Medrash says and see if you see anything there. Okay, we're going to continue with our discussion. We were talking about the fact that the Mishnah mentions first the morning prayer, and then it talks about the afternoon prayer and the night prayer. Now, there's another interesting thing about the Mishnah, and that is that when it talks about mincha, and when it talks about musaf, it uses a different term. For mincha, it says until erev. For musaf, it says kol hayoim, the whole day. And so Taisvis over here is bothered with that. Why does it use a different term? That musaf, the additional prayer on Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh, holidays, why does it use a prayer? Why does it use a term all day but for mincha, it only says until evening? Yes, Ezra. You're muted.
I don't see, I don't remember, I don't see in the verses anywhere where a musaf discusses a specific time period. And so therefore, this particular Mishnah is basically saying, since there is no time period stated, it would you should be able to do it any time during the day, the entire day.
And how is that different than mincha?
Mincha, again, if the mincha is connected to the Tamid offering, the one that says Ben Arabayim would then be the connection for the mincha offering. And that one is stated specifically in the Torah as a time at which you bring in the second one.
So I think what you're saying is musaf you can even daven in the morning, and mincha can only be done afternoon. Is that what you're saying? Pretty much.
Yeah, because it says kol hayom.
Kol hayom.
It's an extra.
Right.
It's an extra offering.
Well, right. Okay. So it has different laws than mincha. So Taisvis wants to bring that out, that people shouldn't think that musaf has to be done in the afternoon, and because I guess maybe in many shuls that's what's normally done. They do the shachris, the reading of the Torah. By the time they get to musaf, it's later. And Taisvis says that's why it says kol hayoim. It says the whole day, because you could even do it in the morning. Musaf could be prayed in the morning, and he says that there is a concept on Rosh Hashanah that if a person is davening alone, they shouldn't do musaf in the morning. But that implies that any other time you would be allowed to do it in the morning. And also if you have a minyan, even on Rosh Hashanah, you could do it in the morning. You don't have to wait till the afternoon to do musaf. And that's why it uses different terminology. For musaf, it says all day. For mincha, it just says until night, because you can't start it before by shachris time. It only begins after the time for the morning period is over. Now, what is really interesting is that there is a gray area in between shachris and mincha. When is the last time you could daven shachris? Noon.
4 hours.
Well, one opinion is 4 hours. The other opinion is noon. In Shulchan Aruch, it mentions that if you miss the 4 hour time, you do have until noon, and you're fine. Even if you purposely missed it 4 hours, you still have until noon. So noon is really the final deadline for the morning prayer. Our Gemara says there is a concept of makeup. You could do a makeup, which we call a tashlumin, afterwards at mincha time, or mincha for Ma'ariv, you could do a tashlumin for mincha. You could do a makeup, but that's not the real deal. The real deal, you really only have either until 4 hours or until noon, and then afterwards it's more like a makeup. Now, the morning prayer you have until noon. The afternoon prayer, when does it begin? It begins a half hour after noon. So what about that middle? What about that middle period?
30 minutes.
There's 30-minute period in between noon and when you could start mincha. What happens during that period? If a person daven mincha, then would he be yaitze, or is he still allowed to daven shachris? There is discussion in the commentaries about that period. There is a period of time that's sort of like in between these two sacrifices, the morning sacrifice and the afternoon sacrifice, which we'll see on the next page about the sacrifices and the fact that the prayers were instituted and based on times of the sacrifices. But there is a half hour that sort of gets lost over there, and it becomes a little unclear in Shulchan Aruch. In the Shulchan Aruch, the Mishnah Berurah, I know they bring down that if a person davened mincha, I thought I had a Shulchan Aruch for it, but it does bring down there that if a person davened mincha in that time period, I don't think that he repeats it. I think we consider him maybe that he possibly fulfilled his obligation, even though it was early, but it was after Chatzos. I should look it up again, but I believe that's the halacha, chapter 233 in let me just take a look. 233 in the Mishnah Berurah. I have a Sefaria here on my phone. Let me just take a look here. If a person daven so the Mishnah Berurah says that even though lechatchila, preferably it's prohibited to daven before that half hour, but b'diavad, if a person daven during this half hour, he does not daven a second time. So very interesting that if a person daven mincha during that half hour, there's what to rely on, in that you were yotze, you fulfilled your mincha obligation, even though the appropriate time is after a half hour. But so that's a good halacha to know, because there are a lot of times a group gets together and they want to daven mincha, and it's Shabbos, and they didn't look up before Shabbos. They didn't look it up. They were allowed to daven what time the exact time period is to daven the earliest mincha, and just in case they messed up within a half hour, they are according to the Mishnah Berurah, they fulfill their obligation. Okay, so that touches upon the difference in the wording of the Mishnah. Yes, Susan.
I just want to ask, all of the prayers were based on the time of when the sacrifices were done? In other words, which came first, the sacrifice or the prayers?
Good question. We're going to be talking about that more in depth on the next side of this page 26b. So let's hold that. That's a good question, but let's hold it for then. There is another discussion here, a very interesting discussion of philosophical question of what is considered night. We consider when 3 stars come out to be night, but is that what's called a cause for night? In other words, when 3 stars come out, that makes it night, or is 3 stars just a sign that the night has come, but it's not the cause? Are 3 stars what makes it be considered night, or 3 stars just tells us here on Earth that we should know that it's considered night now because 3 stars have come out? It's an interesting question, and the difference between these two ways of looking at it would be that there is a law that witnesses cannot give testimony on a half a thing, something that's a half. For example, if witnesses were to give testimony that a child is an adult? What makes a child turn into an adult? So they've reached a certain age, the age of 13 for a boy, and for a girl is 12. In addition to that, if they have what's called two cyrus, two pubic hairs, that makes them considered an adult. Now, what happens if you have witnesses that saw this boy who turned 13, they saw him in the mikvah, and the two witnesses saw that he has two pubic hairs, so he has become an adult. They can go and testify in court that this child is an adult and he should be judged according to the laws of being an adult. What happens if you have two witnesses that only saw one hair, one pubic hair, and another two witnesses saw the other pubic hair? Is that considered a good testimony to testify that this child is an adult? Or is each testimony, each group of witnesses, is that considered they're only testifying on a half a thing? They're not testifying on a full item. They're not testifying on a full matter. And because of that, their testimony is not accepted in court just because one of them, two witnesses say, we saw a hair on the right side, and the other two say, we saw a hair on the left side. That's not going to be considered good enough because that's called a chatzi dover. That's a half a thing. And testimony on a half a thing is not good enough. Now, the same question could be asked, what would happen in the sky if you have witnesses that say, I saw a star, we saw one star on the right side of the moon, and other people will say on the north side of the moon, and others will say, two other witnesses will say, well, we saw two stars on the left side of the moon, on the south side of the moon. So is that going to be considered good enough testimony? This will depend on if the testimony of the stars, is that considered a cause, or is that considered just a symbol? If it's just a symbol, so they are testifying, it is not a problem if they testify on a, on a half a proof, because their testifying doesn't really affect the matter. Again, if the stars if it's what makes it night, then that would be testifying on a half a item, the half a matter, because this doesn't really do anything. One star doesn't do anything. But if the stars only show that it's night, then their testimony is not on something that happened, that occurred. It's just proof that it's night. That is not considered a half a matter, and because of that, it would be considered good testimony. So this is one of the questions that's asked. And David, do you have an answer for this?
No, I had a question on this.
Oh.
What happens? Mr. A says that Mr. B stole my pizza. And Mr. B says, I wasn't anywhere near your pizza. And two witnesses come and said, we saw Mr. B steal half the pizza. We didn't see him steal the whole pizza like Mr. A says, but we saw him steal half the pizza. So what about that testimony? They're testifying on half of it.
So that wouldn't be the exact scenario. A better case is because in your scenario, they're both testifying on half. One of them happens to be testifying on the whole. He's on the half plus another half. The other one is testifying on the half.
No. So both witnesses are testifying on a half. The only one that's claiming the whole is Mr. A, whose pizza was stolen.
So it doesn't matter. So the testimony is on a half a pie, and that's a good testimony. But what happens if you have two witnesses say, we saw this man sneak into your house, and the other two witnesses testify, we saw this man with something in his backpack sneak out of your house, but they didn't actually see him take anything. So that would be a half a matter. They're testifying. Everyone is testifying on half. This one saying he got in, that one saying he left. No one knows if he actually took, you know what I mean? It's a half a matter. That would be like more of a similar scenario. We're dealing with, in other words, they saw half a murder. This one, we saw him holding the gun. We saw him with but only one, it's testimony on a half a action. That would be a problem. It's called davar v'loy chatzi davar. You can only testify on a full matter, something that's fully important, a full story. Now, the case that we're talking about has actually, there's a similar, the case that I'm talking about with regard to night there is a similarity, there is a similar example in the laws, in monetary laws, when it comes to testifying about a person dwelling in a house that they dwelled there for 3 years. There is rules according to monetary law that if you have testimony, if you have 2 witnesses that say that you lived in a house for 3 years, then someone comes and claims that it's theirs, your testimony, the testimony that the witnesses that you bring, that you lived there for 3 years, is considered a proof. Why didn't this guy come during those 3 years that you've been living there, and he never came and claimed the property? So 3 years is called a chazaka. It's considered that we assume that it's yours. And as long as you have a good claim, a good reason to say that it's yours, that would be a proof that it's yours. Now, as you say, I bought it, I paid money for it, and I bought it 3 years ago. I've been living here. You had all the time in the last 3 years to come and claim that it's your property, and you never claimed it. This is considered a very good proof. Now, the fact that I lived here 3 years didn't cause the house to be mine. It just proves that I actually am the owner and I had bought it 3 years ago. But it doesn't cause. Again, we're comparing these two types of situations, called a siba, that there could be something that's a siba, a cause, or a siman, or a sign. Is this the cause that it's mine? No, the house is mine because I bought it. The siman, a sign that it's mine, a proof, is the fact that I lived here for 3 years and no one ever questioned it. That is called a siman that it's mine. It's a sign that it's mine. The siba, the cause that it's mine, is because I paid for it. I bought it. I have there was a contract that we did some type of act of acquisition. I bought it. I got it. It's my property. Now, what happens if you have witnesses that testify that in the year 5780, the Jewish year 5780, we saw Yankel living here. Another group of witnesses come and say, in 5781, we saw Yankel living here. And another group of witnesses say, in 5782, we saw Yankel living here. So you have witnesses that testify on, is that called a half a thing? Davar v'lei chatzi davar? Is that considered testifying on a half a thing? Or is that considered testifying on an entire matter? Because they're not really testifying if I bought it. They're testifying on a siman, on a sign that it's mine. If they're testifying about I bought it and they're only testifying on a half a thing, so then it's not considered good testimony. But if they're testifying just on a sign that it's mine, and this is a 1 year sign, another year sign, another year sign, ultimately together it's considered that it's mine. But each of these are considered our sources that it's mine. That would be considered a good testimony, believe it or not. So that is
Rabbi?
the way. Yeah. Yes, Moshe.
Isn't there a star of some sort to indicate
Yeah,
that
but I
the
lost
property
it.
was
But we
sold?
lost the property. We lost the contract. We lost it.
I see.
So the law is that 3 years is good enough. And the law is that even if I have 6 different witnesses, 2 witnesses say 1 year, 2 witnesses say the second year, and 2 witnesses talk about the third year, that is considered good testimony. Now, when it comes to testifying about a child becoming bar mitzvah, then it doesn't work to do 2 witnesses testify that there was a pubic hair on the right side and 2 witnesses testify a pubic hair on the left side. That won't work. Why not? Because there, the pubic hair is what makes the child an adult. He has matured with pubic hair. He has matured. That is what constitutes an adult, is someone whose body has matured. Now, when it comes to testifying about the property is considered good testimony, because by property, it would be considered that this is decent proof, because we're not testifying on a half a thing. We're testifying that it's completely mine. And the reason is because I lived there 1 year, and that one testifies I lived there another year, and the other one, In other words, it's mine because I bought it. But they're testifying the proof that it's mine is because I live there. So it's only a siman, it's only a symbol that it's my property. So now let's take these two cases and compare it to the laws of 3 stars. If you have 2 witnesses that testify that there's a star in the heavens at this point, and the other 2 witnesses say there's 2 other stars in another part of the heavens on the north side of the moon, is that considered good testimony to be considered it is definitely night? Or is that considered testifying on a half a thing? So it depends if stars are considered a siman. Is this just a sign that it's night? Or does the stars coming out, is that what makes it night? So the answer to this question that's given is that if you think about the beginning of creation, the stars were not in the heavens yet until the 4th day. And the 4th day is when everything was established in the heavens. So before that, it says, and it was evening and it was morning. This is the day 1. And it was evening and it was morning, day 2. So we see that the stars are only a siman and not a siba. They're only a sign that it's night. But even if you don't have stars, if God tells you it's night, then it's night even without the stars. The stars don't make it night. The stars are just a sign that the night has arrived. And that, that would mean that if you have different witnesses that see stars in different places, that would be considered good enough for testimony, because the stars is only a sign that it's night. They're not actually making it night. That's just an interesting little insight that's discussed. Yes, David.
So in that situation, what happens where the document was lost? The witnesses came and said, yeah, the guy was there for 3 years and he's living there.
Right.
And then he passes away, or he wants to sell the property, but he doesn't have the document of ownership. Can the court establish for him a new owner, like a deed that he can sell or leave as an inheritance? Otherwise, after he passes away, there's no documentation
So I'm not really sure that he needs any more documentation than what he has. In other words, he could write a document that says, I am selling this property. Me, so-and-so Yankel, I'm selling this property. And the proof that it's mine is the fact that, that I was there. In other words, I'm not proving that it's mine. I'm just selling it to you. And this document, the proof that it's mine is from these witnesses. Because the other witnesses have proved already that it's mine. If someone questions that it was mine from way back, we do have proof. These witnesses proved that it's mine. Now, will the court write a document? The court probably would write a document saying we had a court case and people questioned this guy, but he doesn't need that. In other words, in reality, all he needs is to write a document saying I'm selling this to Shmuel and such and such amount of money and this day and so on, and that's good enough. And then Shmuel takes that document. He has a document that he proved he bought it from this and this person. That's good enough as a document. It's not like, you know what I mean? Like you don't need necessarily to have a proof that it was this guy's originally and how he got it originally and so on. That's not necessary. But you're right. They probably would write a document if it went to court. I would assume that the courts would write something that says that we had this court case and it does prove it as well. Okay, so we are now on the Gemara on page 26a, and we're about. Let's see, we are Mesave. We're 4 lines up from the bottom. 4 lines up from the bottom. Mesave. Mesave, the B'nai Yeshiva, the Yeshiva students asked this question when they were studying this topic. They asked this question on our Gemara and on our Mishnah that there's a verse in Koheles that says, "Mu'uvas lo yuchal liskay." There's crookedness that cannot be fixed. And missing out that you won't be able to be counted in on. There are situations where it's too late. And this is rare because in Yiddishkeit, generally, we do have opportunities to make things up. But the verse in Koheles does say that there are things that you can't fix up. Me'uvas lo yuchal liskoin, there's crookedness that can't be corrected. And what is this? So one of the explanations is Me'uvas lo yuchal liskoin, the crookedness that cannot be fixed. Zeh shabitel kriyash mashal arvis, kriyash mashal shachris. This is someone who is mevatel. I'm not sure of a good translation. He did not recite the Kriyash Mashal Arvis or the Kriyash Mashal Shachris. The word bitel is he nullified, he ruined, he basically transgressed. He didn't say the Shema of night or the Shema of the morning. If you didn't do that, you can't fix it up. Oy tefillah shel arvis, oy tefillah shel shachris. Or if you missed out the prayer of the night or the prayer of the morning. So these are cases that can't be fixed up. Now, this seems to be a contradiction for the previous Gemara, because the Gemara said earlier that we could fix up the prayers if you miss out. What do? You go to the next prayer, you do it twice, you double. You do another prayer. Let's say you missed the morning, do mincha twice. You missed the mincha, you do ma'ariv twice. Any prayer could be made up by the next prayer. So why are we saying that you can't fix it up if you really can? So then the same statement that explains this verse, it also explains the end of the verse as well. The end of the verse says, "V'chesrain lo yuchal lehimanais," that there are things that you miss out on or you were not included and you are not able to be counted in on. What does that refer to? And the reason why the Gemara is bringing this is simply just to finish off the verse. It is not really necessary for our Gemara, this point. The main point we've already understood. The main point was that this is a contradiction to the previous Gemara, that we said, and the previous statements that we said that you could always make up a prayer by doing a double prayer the next time. And here, we're saying that you can't fix it up. It's mu'uvas, a crookedness that you can't fix up. Now, the next statement is just explaining the end of that verse. That what does it mean, a chesrein lo yuchal lehimanais, that you can miss out in being counted in on a mitzvah. This is that your friends were counted in for a mitzvah and you were not counted in with them. You miss out on this opportunity. Every mitzvah is an opportunity. Your friends participated in a certain mitzvah. If you didn't, it is too late. You can participate in other mitzvahs, but you missed out in that opportunity. When your friends were counted in a mitzvah and you missed out, that would be a chisaron layuchal limanais. And this verse in Ecclesiastes emphasizes that, take advantage of every opportunity you have. There are certain things you're going to miss out on and you cannot fix up. And that would be your friends who were involved in a dvar mitzvah and you did not get included. Now, the problem is we're stuck with this contradiction. Does prayer allow for makeup or not? So the Gemara answers, Amar Rab Yitzchak, Amar Rab Yochanan. We're on the bottom line. Rab Yitzchak says in the name of Rab Yochanan, Halcha b'mayaskinon. Here, what are we referring to? What are we talking about? Shabitel b'mezid. He intentionally did not pray. He intentionally did not say the Shema in the night and the morning. He intentionally did not say the prayer, the night prayer, the morning prayer. He was mevatelit b'mezid. He desecrated it, or I'm not sure a good word for not reciting. He was mevatelit on purpose. He on purposely. What is it?
It says omitted.
Purposely omitted it. Okay, good. He purposely omitted it. Thank you, David. He purposely omitted the prayer, and in that scenario, you can't make it up. In that scenario, it's too late. Amar Rav Ashi says, Dekanami. This is also in the words it is hinted, it is implied that this is what it specifically means. In other words, you're explaining it to mean that he omitted the prayer. But really, if you look in the word, it is meduyak. It fits grammatically with the choice of words that were used. Diktani bitel v'lei katani ta'a. It uses the word bitel, that he omitted it on purpose, and it doesn't use the word for mistake, which is ta'a. He made a mistake. Shma mino. We hear from this that this is the correct explanation, and this is how to answer this contradiction. So what comes out from here is that if you half, maybe do a half, just a little, or a quarter. That what comes out from here is that if you miss out on a prayer, and it happens, person goes to sleep and forgot that they missed out Ma'ariv. You go to sleep and the next morning you remember. So if you made a mistake, you can make it up. What happens if you intentionally miss out? Then you can't make it up. You cannot do two shachrises. You're tired and you say, you know what? I'm not davening. I'm too tired. It's just too much. I have a lot of stuff tomorrow. I'm not going to daven. Then you can't make it up the next day. Now, what happens if you get drunk? What happens if you're busy at work and you push it off? And by the next thing, so you purposely push it off. And the next thing you know, it's already the morning. You're working all night. And you kept pushing it off. Is that called purpose, intentional, omitting the prayer? Or is that called mistake? You got drunk. You thought you would be able to daven later, and you were drinking with some friends. And in the end, you totally forgot about the prayer, or you fell asleep in your drunkenness, and you ended up missing out. But you intentionally pushed it off. So that would be interesting. These are interesting questions. How to interpret the meaning of this Gemara? What does it mean to on purpose or by mistake? So in Shulchan Aruch, it brings down that these are all considered mistakes. These are considered mistakes. You didn't purposely, not pray. You pushed it off thinking you're going to be able to do it later, and then you forgot, or then you fell asleep, or then something happened. These are considered mistakes. You can make these up. These are not considered real. Intentional is when you say, I am too tired and I am not going to pray, and that's it. That is called intentional. But if you just push it off and you get sidetracked, and you intentionally push it off, but you still plan on davening, and then something happens, then that's okay. Yes, Susan, you had your hand up for a while.
It also has to do with if you're the kind of person that gets so angry and so upset, and you blame Hashem for everything, and you say, I'm not going to daven, or I'm not going to pray to say the prayers. I'm so angry. It's your fault. It's not my fault. I did everything you told, that type of person who's so angry and they don't do the proper prayers.
Someone who's angry at God?
What?
Is that what you're talking about? Someone who's angry at God, or just angry?
Angry at God.
Uh-huh. Someone who's angry at God. That would be purpose, right?
That's not, they can't do a makeup.
Right. But you have people who aren't exactly angry at God. They just are intentionally not going to pray.
Why? Why not? I don't understand.
Well, they're tired and they say, you know what, I'm not praying tonight. It could be such a situation. And what we're learning here is then you can't make it up. And therefore it's important to never give in to your evil. There's the evil inclination that some people have, most of us. And so you have to try not to give in.
I'm sorry. I never knew a Jew that got drunk. I'm sorry.
Uh-huh. Right. Okay.
I just lay down for a minute. I tell my wife, honey, I'm going to shul. I just want to lay down for a minute first.
Right. Especially on Shabbos afternoon. Right. Okay. So that is the story of, the laws of this, of forgetting to daven, or on purpose not davening and making it up afterwards. Now, I should also mention that even though there's no makeup, but there is a concept of a tfilas nedava, of doing a gift Shemona Esrei that a person could do, even though they purposely missed out. But you could do a tfilas nedava. You feel a closeness to Hashem that you really want to do a prayer, an extra prayer, and give a gift to Hashem. That would be called the tfilas nedava. It doesn't make up what you missed, but it sort of adds merit to your situation. So you're not exactly fixing up the mess that you made, but you can add light to your soul and to your mitzvahs. You're adding some merit. So that is called the tfilas nedava that could be done. Okay, now that now that we've concluded this Amud, we're gonna turn to the next page. Any questions? Next page, 26b. What do you want to say, Isaac?
No, I just said Tana Rabbanan.
Tana Rabbanan. Oh, Tana Rabbanan. I didn't hear what you said. Tana Rabbanan. The rabbis learned. 26b. Everyone, turn the page. The rabbis learned. Ta'av alay hispalel mincha be'erev Shabbos. If a person made a mistake and he did not pray mincha on erev Shabbos, it was Friday afternoon. He missed mincha. So the law is mispalel belel Shabbos shtayim. He davens on Friday night twice. And on the side, it adds in shtayim shel Shabbos, 2 Shabbos Shmona Esrei. So you're going to be reciting a double Shmona Esrei. And the first Shmona Esrei will be for what you're obligated to do now. The second one will be the makeup Shmona Esrei. And as we learned yesterday, we spoke about the fact that the makeup is really, since you're davening anyway, then you can do like a makeup, and it'll be considered like you've covered your bases, so to speak. Once you're already davening, so you're able to sneak in another prayer that'll do a makeup. So what you're really doing is the initial prayer is the obligation now. I'm just going to close the door. There's some background noise. Okay. So you initially daven the Shemona Esrei. You're going to do the first one for Shabbos, and the second one is going to be a makeup for the Mincha. Now, keep in mind that your Shemona Esrei is not going to be the Shemona Esrei of that you missed. You missed the 19 blessing Shemona Esrei, right? The weekday Shemona Esrei is nice and long. The Shabbos one is very short. Your makeup Shemona Esrei is just going to be the short one, the Shabbos Shemona Esrei, and it's going to be considered a makeup for your mincha that you missed, which had 19 blessings. But it's okay. You're doing another Shemona Esrei, another prayer, and it's making up for what you missed. Now, ta'av alay hispalel mincha b'Shabbos. If you made a mistake and you didn't daven mincha on Shabbos, mispalel b'motzei Shabbos shtayim. So now you messed up and you missed. This was the example Isaac was giving. That person went to sleep Shabbos afternoon and you missed the mincha. So what do you do now? So you can daven 2 Shemona Esreis Ma'ariv. What are the 2 Shemona Esreis that you're going to daven? The 2 19 blessing Shemona Esreis. The two Shemona Esreis of Motzei Shabbos, you're going to do double. Even though you're making up a Shabbos Shemona Esrei, a mincha on Shabbos, which is a short Shemona Esrei, it doesn't matter. Now you're making up, the second prayer is going to be a makeup prayer. It's going to be a makeup for the mincha that you missed. Now, which one do you do the Havdalah in? There's an extra paragraph that you recite what's called the Havdalah, which is just like we recite Havdalah on a cup of wine after Shabbos. Well, thank you. In the Shemona Esrei, there's a paragraph, as Isaac says, there's a little paragraph you add in the Shemona Esrei, in the Amidah, the prayer on Saturday night, you add Atochein Antanu. Which one would you add that in? The first one or the second one? Well, the first one is for Ma'ariv. The first one is for the night service. The second Shemona Esrei that you're reciting is the makeup for Mincha on Shabbos that you missed. So it would make sense that it should go in the first Shemona Esrei for two reasons. Number one is now you're reciting the Ma'ariv Shemona Esrei, and this fits within the Ma'ariv Shemona Esrei. Additionally, there is another reason, which is this is your first Shemona Esrei of Saturday night. It would make sense to that this one should have the Ma'ariv. So the Gemara says, Mavdil Berishayna, ve'enoi Mavdil B'shniya. You do the Havdalah in the first Shemona Esrei, but you don't do Havdalah
in the second one.
In the second one. Now, Rashi says the reason of the first one is the tefillah of now. It's the prayer that you're obligated now, and therefore you would recite Havdalah in the paragraph of Atoch and Antanu in that one. The second one is only a makeup. You don't do Havdalah in the makeup. You already did your Havdalah, and you do it in the prayer in the Shemona Esrei of the first one. Now, what happens if you did it in the Hivdil B'Shniya v'Lei Hivdil B'Rishayna? What happens if you messed up? You did it in the second one, you didn't do it in the first one. So it says, Shniya also loy, Rishayna loy also loy. The second one is considered you've done a good prayer. You've prayed, you had in mind properly. The prayer is accepted. But the first one is not accepted loy also loy. So the Gemara asks, does this mean that because you didn't do Havdalah, you lose out? And it's not considered a good Shemona Esrei? Lememra, does this mean to say the Kivan Delay Abdil B'Kamaisa, Kaman Delay Soli Dummy? Is this like you didn't pray at all if you miss out and have Atoch and Antanu? We know that if you miss out, Umahadrinolay, and you have to go back and recite it again. We know that if you miss out in Atoch and Antanu, you don't have to repeat the Shemona Esrei. And that's what the Gemara asks. Veraminu, and the Bnei Yeshiva, they ask the contradiction from another source where it shows that you don't have to go back if a person misses out the prayer of Havdalah in the Saturday night Shemona Esrei. And our Gemara implies pretty clearly that you do have to go back, because what happened? In our Gemara, we said that if you do Havdalah in the second Shemona Esrei, but you miss it in the first, then you messed up and you got to do another Shemona Esrei. Your first one is not considered a good prayer. So it sounds like because you missed out in the Havdalah, it's not good enough, and now you got to repeat it. And the source that we're bringing from now, this other source, it says clearly that you don't have to go back and repeat it. There's a lot of additional prayers that are added in the Shemona Esrei. At certain times when we want rain, we add a prayer for rain. When it's not a time for rain, we remove that prayer and we have a different word about, we say Mashiv, saying bracha, Hashem should give blessing. There's another place where we mention rain. And if it's not a time for rain, we say Murdat Tol, Hashem should give us a dew of blessing. And so there's different additions in the Shemona Esrei, and another addition is the Atoch and Antanu that we're talking about now. So what does it say? If a person made a mistake and he missed out, if he missed out in the Gvuras Geshamim, mentioning that Hashem's strength in rain, Mashiv Haruach, Hashem blows the wind, Umayrid Hageshem, and he gives rain. When we mention that praise of Hashem, his strength in rain, we mention, if a person forgot to mention it, the Tchias HaMeisim and the blessing that we talk about, the resurrection of the dead, that blessing, we talk about the strength, Hashem's strength in rain. If a person messed up there and missed out, v'sheila, and he forgot to ask for rain, the same talu mutter, Hashem should give us tal, dew, umutter, and rain. We normally ask for that during the time of the rainy season. We ask for rain. If he forgot to mention that, b'birkas hashanim, in the blessing called Barech Aleinu, bless us for the year, during the year. Shana Azais, this year Hashem should bless us, and so that's called the Berchas Hashanim blessing. If you forgot to mention that, so the law is Machzir Noisei, then you have to go back. Havdalah, but if you miss out in reciting the Atoch and Antanu prayer, which is the Havdalah, the prayer that's mentioned at the end of Shabbos, after Shabbos is over, and you mention it not only on afterwards when you recite Havdalah on a cup of wine, but also in the prayer, the paragraph called Atochen Antano. So what happens if you miss out in that prayer, which is normally recited in Ata, in Chein Hadas, in the prayer of giving us, Hashem gives us knowledge. You missed up, you missed out on that. Ein machzir naisai. Not so. It doesn't obligate you to go back. Ein machzir naisai. We don't tell you to go back. We don't tell you to. We don't say you have to go back because you could really say it later on. You're going to say it on Havdalah in a cup of wine. So it sounds like it's not as it's not such an issue. You miss out Havdalah, no problem. And before our Gemara said you got to go back. So the Gemara answers that the Gemara says kasha. This is a kasha. We don't know the answer. Now, it's interesting because there are different places where the Gemara uses different terms. There's a term used as teku. Teku means Elijah is going to answer this question. There's terms called tiyufta. We've proven wrong the previous Gemara. And there's a term that just says kasha. So the commentaries over here mention that because the Gemara only says kasha, it means that there is an answer. For whatever reason, the Gemara doesn't mention it, but there really is an answer to this question. And the Rif mentions an answer to the Gemara's question. But before we jump to the answer, and maybe we'll do that tomorrow, I think we should just go over it just so we have it more clear. So what we've been learning about is that if a person makes a mistake and he doesn't daven a certain prayer, he makes it up on the next time, the next prayer that's available. So he missed out in Mincha on Shabbos. He does Ma'ariv of Saturday night. He missed out Mincha, the afternoon prayer, Erev Shabbos on Friday. He makes it up with a Friday night prayer, doing the Friday night prayer twice. The first time is the obligation prayer that he has to do now, the night prayer, the Shabbos night prayer. The second prayer is the makeup for the first, for the one he missed, for the Mincha that he missed. And he basically just does another Shabbos Shmoneh Esrei. Saturday night, he messed up, he missed out on the Mincha on Shabbos. Now he's going to do two on Saturday night. The first one, he does this real Saturday night prayer, which is with Havdalah, with Atachin Antanu. The second one, he does, but he skips out Atachin Antanu because the second one is a makeup for the Mincha that he missed out on Shabbos. So he does a second Shmoneh Esrei. So that's clear. Now, what happens if he messed up with the Havdalah part? So the Gemara said that if you messed up with the Havdalah part, you're going to have to go back. In other words, you skipped it in the first one, and you recited it in the second Shmoneh Esrei. You got to go back and do another third Shmoneh Esrei now, and then you'll fulfill all your obligations. Now, let's think for a moment. What happens when you do two Shmoneh Esreis? Let's say I missed out Mincha today, and I'm going to do two Ma'arivs tonight. So I missed out Mincha today, and I do two Ma'arivs tonight. What happens when I do two Ma'arivs tonight? What am I supposed to have in mind? The first one is a makeup, or the first one is my obligation? The first one is a makeup. No, the first one is an obligation. Yes, the first one is supposed to be an obligation. The second Shmoneh Esrei is a makeup for the Mincha that I missed out, right? Now, what happens if I have intention the opposite? If I have intention that the makeup is really the first one, and the Shmoneh Esrei that I'm obligated on, the night Shmoneh Esrei, I have in mind I'm doing it second. What happens then? So this is really the basis of the answer that the Rif gives for this question. And if you think about it, it all boils down to, did you have the wrong intention? And did you clearly show that you had the wrong intention when you did it? So what happened here was that the person is davening Ma'ariv. In one of them, he says Havdalah, and the other one, he doesn't. If you said Havdalah in the first Shemona Esrei, it makes sense that you're having in mind that Shemona Esrei is the night Shemona Esrei, and the second Shemona Esrei that you're praying is a makeup for the first one, for makeup for the earlier one that you missed. That's what it sounds like. What happens if you do the Havdalah in the second Shemona Esrei? It sounds like, it seems from your actions that you're doing the Havdalah. By doing Havdalah in the second one, it seems from your actions that what you're having in mind is that the first Shemona Esrei is the makeup Shemona Esrei, and the second one is your Havdalah, is your obligation for the night Shemona Esrei. So you're having in mind the opposite of what you should be having in mind. Yes, Ezra.
That assumes that an individual, knows all these halachot. But suppose, okay, he davens and generally forgets to say a tachonatano in the proper place. And then he says to himself, oh, I forgot. And so therefore I say the second one, and I say it with the right intention. According to basically what you're saying, everything that he said before in the first is levatala, which was never the intention of the individual.
He did not have in mind to say a bracha levatala, but he messed up by having in mind the wrong Shemona Esrei first. He did mess up because according to law, he's supposed to first do the obligation Shemona Esrei, and the second one is the makeup. And he did the makeup. Now, if he just made a mistake in Havdalah, that's what we're going to see. We're going to talk about it more tomorrow. I don't want to take up any more time of your precious time. My time is up, really. But we'll talk more about it tomorrow. But the point is that there's a difference between, in your scenario, where a person just made a mistake, he messed up and missed out in the Havdalah, or if he had in mind the wrong intention, that he's doing this one is the makeup and the other one is the actual Shemona Esrei, or vice versa. So that's really what it boils down to. So your point is valid. In other words, you're correct. If a person mistakenly forgot, Havdalah, we see clearly in the second source here that you don't have to go back. So you have a very good point. The only question is, how does that relate to in the scenario where he messes up, and do we include his intention and so on, or his action? Which one plays a role? But we'll talk more about it tomorrow. Everyone have a wonderful day. Sei gesund.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Sei gesund, Rabbi.